Straight up, we've got a clash of styles at middleweight. And listen, there's a lot of asterisks around the weight coming into this one, but we have Baby K Karl Roberson taking on all-in Brendan Allen, the former LFA middleweight champ. And why do I bring up the weight? Well, for Brendan Allen, his last time out, it was a bit of a hodgepodge together type of fight where he took on Sean Strickland at a catch weight of 195 pounds, and he weighed in at 193.5. That's fair. For Karl Roberson, he took on Marvin Vettori. And listen, if you like Taylor Swift, well, I don't have a whole lot to say to you, but she had that song about bad blood, this and that. It was a bad blood fight between Karl Roberson and Marvin Vettori, and ultimately Karl decided, hey, well, I'm going to weigh 190.5 pounds for that fight. And listen, Karl, can't be doing that. Can't be doing that. And can't be delivering performances like he did against Vettori. Because in that fight, well, the first takedown, who was it? Karl Roberson. Karl Roberson ended up getting the back of Vettori. It was like, holy smokes, what is this fantasy world that I've landed upon? And then Marvin snapped out of it and ultimately ended up winning the fight. He finishes Roberson in the first round. Now, I will say, Roberson doing the jump off the cage while he was caught in a bit of a headlock, that was pretty cool. For Brendan Allen, if we're talking total role reversal, go watch his fight against Sean Strickland. Brendan went, hey, Sean's a good striker, and so am I. And then he got totally outstruck by Sean Strickland. He got finished in the second round. So for the 5-on-in for both of these guys, Roberson 3-2, Allen 4-1. You look at it for Allen, he beats Aaron Jeffrey on Contender Series. He beats Kevin Holland, Tom Breeze, and Kyle Dawkins. I'd say, you know, the closest of those fights was probably, the Dawkins fight out of the 4 wins?
This fight is just the definition of a clash of styles, and that's the easiest way that we really can break this down, because Karl Roberson, I know he's got a lot of submission wins, but let's just be honest. What's the first thing you think of when you think Karl Roberson? For me, it's glory. That's the first thing I think of. And you know how good his striking is. Karl Roberson, if MMA was conducted under kickboxing rules, he would be in the top 5, and I'm very comfortable saying that. Karl Roberson, as a pure striker, is a handful to deal with, because he does one thing that we get on a lot of fighters for not doing. He's great at keeping range with his strikes, if that's what he chooses to do. Now, kind of plays into what you had said about the Vettori fight. Sometimes the fight IQ is not always there for Roberson, and he's not terrible at grappling. I would say he's a good offensive grappler, but in some of his defensive grappling, like we saw against Vettori, he can get overpowered by those bigger, stronger middleweights. Now, it is kind of interesting, because when I think of Brendan Allen, he does a lot of what Marvin Vettori does well. He just doesn't strike nearly as well as Marvin Vettori. Marvin Vettori, he's got great top pressure, great ground and pound, but of course he is comfortable with his hands. With Brendan Allen, he's got the great ground and pound. He really makes guys pay for being underneath.
Tom Breeze.
He's got great submissions as well. We saw what he was able to do to a great fighter like Kevin Holland. But my problem with Brendan Allen is he doesn't throw strikes in volume, and he doesn't keep his hands up when he does throw in combination. And that's my big thing for Brendan Allen. I don't even think he's that bad of a striker, if I'm being honest. The problem is in his defense. And I know I always think of Luke Rockhold when I think of good strikers who are bad defensively, but Brendan Allen is slowly creeping into that category, because for Allen, we know what he's so good at. And I know I talk about Sarah Kaufman when I'm thinking, hey, if they just knew what they were good at, they would have a lot more success in MMA. But for Brendan Allen, if he realized, hey, I'm great at wrestling, I'm really good at grappling, what if I just took guys down and tried to grapple them? That might be the path of least resistance. If Brendan Allen goes out there and gets the first takedown against Karl Roberson, I think I know how this fight's going to go for the total of the 15 minutes. It's going to be a lot of Brendan Allen in top control, and Karl Roberson, it's probably going to be a lot of ground and pound. And if Karl Roberson can defend, I'll say the first, maybe even the second takedown attempt, he's going to absolutely piece Brendan Allen up on the feet. I'm really curious, though, do you think Roberson can have any success off his back against Brendan Allen, or do you think it is so cut and dry as when it's on the feet, it will be for Roberson, and when it's on the mat, Allen's the one in control?
We've seen Karl Roberson do poorly against grapplers. I mean, that's the thing. You look at the overall body of work. Again, you talked about the kickboxing. Jerome LeBanner, big-time fight there. He got finished by Dustin Jacoby. Again, 2 knockdowns in a round, and that's all she wrote. But you look at the wins. Ryan Spann goes to take him down. Well, Ryan Spann has one kryptonite. It's that one spot on the Death Star. And if you can get it right, holy smokes, it's just elbows when he goes to take you down. It's happened a few times. It happened in that fight. He finishes Darren Stewart, and it was so weird that he submitted Darren Stewart, who's a halfway decent wrestler and grappler, if you want to see evidence of that. Maybe the Duran Win fight, I guess. He gets finished by Cesar Ferreira. That was a pay-per-view prelim headliner. That was really weird. Then he fights Jack Marshman at UFC 230, and I thought, okay, so he loses that fight. And then he fights on the main card of a pay-per-view in a fight that was kind of like, Well, it happened.
He just pieced him up at range. That was the problem. And I do think you can parallel that Jack Marshman fight a little bit with the Brendan Allen fight. Is Marshman more hittable than Brendan Allen? I would say slightly, but the problem is Marshman has never had the wrestling to get to Roberson, and that was the problem. You could see he could get on the inside of Karl Roberson, but he couldn't actually get the fight to the mat. But I do think that you can pull a little bit from that Jack Marshman fight if you are in the camp of Brendan Allen.
Yeah, after that, goes up to 205, fights Glover Teixeira, gets finished predictably. Then he fights Wellington Turman, also really weird fight. That one at middleweight, he gets a split decision win. Okay, that's fine. He fights Roman Kopylov, his second to last time out, and he beats him by third round rear naked. And the weirdest thing about that fight was, well, he beat him for the first 2 rounds. Totally outstruck him. They hype up Kopylov because he's a baby face. He's only 8-0 going into the fight. He was a big prospect, big M1 global guy. Roberson looked great, takes him down, submits him at the end. Awesome. And the one thing that he does really well, if the fight's up against the cage, Karl Roberson has this weird way of transitioning to get your back, and then he tries to get into a rear naked choke. He did it against Vettori. He ended up with a rear naked choke against Kopylov. He does have some other chokes on his record. Stewart's another one by rear naked. But against Vettori, that's the thing. Another grappler, another good wrestler, and obviously we've seen what Vettori could do from June of last year until right now. The guy's in title contention. Whitaker probably overtook him, but they wouldn't have had Marvin Vettori sitting cage side if he wasn't somewhat in that conversation. That was just last weekend. He loses that fight. For me, I'm upset at Karl Roberson, for 2 reasons. One, that he lost that fight against Vettori. 2, because he was supposed to fight Dalcha Champ twice at the end of last year, and twice we made videos for it, and twice Karl Roberson couldn't make it. Now, unfortunate, he got the vid, and then he had the symptoms of the vid, and now we're here. So Karl Roberson, again, now he gets an opportunity against Brendan Allen. Brendan Allen, like I said, thought he was a striker against Sean Strickland, got pieced up. He beat Kyle Dawkins in a fight where Dawkins kind of took some of the tide near the end, but ultimately a Brendan Allen win. He finishes Tom Breeze in a fight where they struck a little bit, and Breeze started landing that, oh, I'm going to feed you the uppercut, going to feed you knuckle sandwich. Brendan Allen gets him to the ground, and near the end, the referee had seen enough, and he landed some elbows and some ground and pound and finished them. Holland, back and forth fight. Kevin Holland was an absolute dummy near the end and decided, I'm going to try and take down Brendan Allen.
But not really. Okay.
And get submitted.
This is the problem. You bring up the fact that Karl Roberson took the back of Marvin Vettori and how that was a showcase, if you will, of Roberson's grappling. Kevin Holland had Brendan Allen's back completely. Brendan Allen's still a good enough grappler to get Kevin Holland off his back with the choke in and then rear naked choke Kevin Holland. So for me, I just don't see any area where Roberson has more success, any other area, than when both of his feet are planted on the mat and when he's at range. And that's really my problem for picking Roberson. I like Brendan Allen in this fight, and I do know that we saw what Sean Strickland was able to do to Allen on the feet, but I do think at least some of what the success that Sean Strickland had was because he's such a rangy striker and he has great cardio. That's the thing about Sean Strickland. He can have such a great output with his cardio, and that's a really big problem for most fighters. With Roberson, I do worry a little bit with his output, and we even look back at the Wellington Turman fight. There's just not a lot happened. Sometimes Karl Roberson, for as good of a striker as he has, we're going to call this the Uriah Hall phenomenon, and I'm probably going to bring this up maybe a little bit later, but for as good of a striker he is, he's such a good counter striker that sometimes he'll just wait and wait and wait and wait because he does want his opponent to really make that first step and then he can counter them. That's the one hesitancy I have about this fight. I could see this being a terribly boring split decision win for either guy. I really could. I could see this being a low output fight where Allen might secure a takedown but can't get a lot off on the mat, and Roberson might land a few jabs and good strikes in the feet but can't land a lot. So I'm ever so slightly going to pick Brendan Allen, but I do see this being one of those fights where it's either Karl Roberson the whole entire way or Brendan Allen the whole entire way.
I looked at so much tape on Karl Roberson coming into this one. I mean, he trains at a Killer B MMA. He also trains at a Nick Cantone MMA. Who's his main training partner? Well, if his main training partner tells us anything, it's Beastin 25-8 Corey Anderson, future Bellator light heavyweight champ after his performance over Dovletsan Yagshimuradov last week. But if Roberson was like, what, a tenth of the grappler that Corey Anderson is, maybe he'd have a lot more success. But for Roberson, a great left kick, a great left high kick. When he throws in combination, he does a great job. When he pumps out that jab, he does an awesome job. He is one of the premier strikers if he brings everything together. And then there's that threat of the takedown. And for Roberson, it's almost like, well, I'm all right at grappling, so I'm just going to be an offensive grappler, and that's where he gets caught into the tropes. That's where you can get caught into defensive submissions. And I agree with you. I look at the odds in this one. Brendan Allen open to minus 205 favorite. He's now minus 136. For Roberson, open to plus 175. He's a plus 110. Now, the money's coming in on Roberson. I look at the picks on Tapology. 945 of them, 90% Allen, 69% submission. I'm kind of surprised now that we actually look at the Tapology votes, and they are a surprise. But the money's coming in on Roberson. The picks are with Allen. I do like Allen as long as he doesn't just assume that I'm a striker. Then he should be all right. When he did get cut in the Holland fight, it was an elbow when he had his he had the back of his head against the mat. Holland caught him clean. They cleaned it up between rounds. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was in the moment going back and watching it today. But I do like Allen in this fight. It is tricky because, again, it's a clash of styles. And if Roberson has improved quite a bit in his grappling abilities, 100% he can do it. Nick Cantone MMA, a super underrated gym there with the Mark Henrys of the world. But I do like the fight. It is a very interesting one.
So I'm sitting on a fence right now. And to my left, I see a 30-26 by Brendan Allen. And to my right, I see a Karl Roberson first-round knockout. And that's really as cut and dry as I see this fight. I really do think it is all one way or the other. But I'm going to agree with you. I do think that the somewhat consistent attack of Brendan Allen and that forward pressure are going to give Karl Roberson troubles. And the problem with Roberson is that he doesn't need to set to throw his really powerful techniques, to throw his kicks, to throw any of his powerful shots with his hands. When he does set his feet, that's going to be Brendan Allen's opportunity to really get in there and go for the takedown attempt. So I'm ever so slightly going to pick Brendan Allen, but I do think this fight is a very volatile one.
Both of us going with all-in Brendan Allen to get the win, and it is a great fight. We have a great card as well. UFC 261 with 3 title fights up at the top. Make sure you check those out and all sorts of great content at FightNightPicks.com the entire week. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. And as we always say, Matt, let's get into it.